Hello, my name's John Kneebone and welcome to Mainline Bait's Carp Fishing TV and another how-to video where today I'm going to show you how to tie the Snowman rig. Now I've got a bit of a story attached to this rig and I thought about making another video to explain it, but do you know what? I'd much rather make this a bigger, better, bumper edition of how to. So what I'm going to do is give you all the details of that story following a step-by-step guide. So let's get started. Vastly underused, we're going to use a Longshank hook for this rig in a size 8. Next, we're going to need a little piece of shrink tubing to form a kicker on the eye of the hook to help it flip over. Alternatively, you can use a pre-made kicker. Next, we're going to use a soft coated braid for the hook link like this. And we're going to use a rig ring so the hook bait and hair can be blown back on the shank of the hook. Now the reason I'm showing you some lead core now isn't for leaders, it's just because I like to take a little bit of the inner wire from the lead core and wrap it around my hook link so I've got a nice grippy anchor point for the next item on the list, which is some putty. We're just going to take a little blob of putty, wrap it around that little bit of wire, and you'll see how we do this later in the video. We'll need some sharp scissors and a standard boilie baiting needle. I'm a huge fan of anti-tangle sleeves, such a simple piece of tackle that does such an important job. We'll need some hair stops to secure our hook baits in place on the hair. For stretching out the hook link and pulling down the knots, we'll need a couple of pulley tools like these. Now for the hook baits, firstly we're going to need a bottom bait boilie like these 15mm banoffee baits. And we'll need a pop-up to sit on top of that. I'm going to use a 12mm Tutti Frutti. Hey guys, sorry for interrupting the video, but I was just having a think about how much support and positivity you guys have been showing the videos and the channel recently, and how we might be able to show our appreciation for you. So I think what I'm going to do today is put together a little giveaway that will include all the items that you've just seen needed to construct this rig, as well as a kilo of boilies and some pop-ups so you've got what you need for the hook bait. So make sure you watch to the end of the video for details on how you can win this rig giveaway. Okay, let's get back to the video. Okay, let's get started with this rig. First thing that we're going to do is take the coated braid and strip away some of the outer coating, around about 5 inches, 10 to 12 centimeters, so we expose the soft inner to make our hair. Now to make the hair, it couldn't be simpler. Simply fold over the hook link material upon itself to make a loop, and then we're going to tie a simple loop knot. Now I like to use a baiting needle for these small sort of fiddly knots. Even though they're very simple to tie, I just find it a lot easier and a lot quicker to do. Just going to tighten that knot down and then trim off the tag end, and that's our hair formed and ready to mount on our hook baits. Now for the hook baits, and the first thing I'm going to do is take one of the 12mm pop-ups and slide that onto the baiting needle first. There we go, that's the pop-up. Now for the bottom bait, and we can slide these both onto the baiting needle at the same time together. You can now see where the Snowman rig gets its name. We've got a smaller buoyant pop-up sitting above a bottom bait which has just enough weight to counterbalance that buoyancy. So we can now thread these two hook baits onto the hair, and the reason that we're doing this now is so that the hair is going to be the perfect length. There's no guesswork involved, and we can now just simply slide in a hair stop to secure those two hook baits in place. There we go, we've ensured that the hair will be the correct length as we proceed to tie up the rest of the rig. You can now pull away around about 12 inches of hook link away from the hook bait, so that once we've tied our knots we'll have a hook link of around about 7 inches in length, and just trim that away from the spool. A little tip now for holding and picking up rig rings, just dampen your finger, push it down on the rig ring, and it should just stick there long enough for you to take your hook link, thread it through the ring, and take that ring down onto the soft section, down onto the hair, and we want that around about 10mm, 12mm maybe away from the bottom of the hook baits. we can now tie a simple overhand loop, just like this, to secure that rig ring in position. And there we go, that rig ring, like I say, around about 1 centimetre from the base of the hook bait. Now you can take your hook, thread that through the ring, and we want to position that ring and the exit point for the hair just round about opposite the point of the hook. And we can now tie our knotless knot. So thread your hook link through the back of the hook and then back around the hook once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5, 6 times, grip it, and then take the tag end of your hook link back through the back of the eye again. Just carefully, gently pull that down tight, and there you go, the knotless knot is complete and the hook is secured and tied to the hook link. Next we need to make a kicker to cover this knot and help the hook flip over. So we're going to take a little bit of the shrink tubing and just trim off round about 14-15 of the shrink tubing there. There you go, you can see we've just got that little short section of shrink tubing, and like I say, you can always use a preformed kicker. Now take your hook link, thread it down through the shrink tubing, slide it down to the hook, get a nice grip of everything, and then just slide that over the eye of the hook. Give it a little bit of a wiggle just to get it into the right place. The kicker, or in this case the shrink tubing, is now in position, and we'll shrink that down later in the video. Now for our anti-tangle sleeve, it's much easier to thread it onto the hook link now rather than before the next step, which is tying our figure of 8 loop knot. Simply take the hook link, wrap it back on itself to make a fairly large loop, then make a second loop with that first loop and take that first loop behind the second loop, and here comes my baiting needle to the rescue again. Thread that through that second loop, pull the first loop back through. It may seem fiddly, but this knot is super neat and super strong, and there you go, we formed the perfect figure of 8 loop knot. Simply moisten the knot with a little saliva, take your pulley tool, and with steady, gentle pressure, pull the knot down tight. You can now trim off the tag end and take the anti-tangle sleeve that we placed onto the hook link earlier, slide that up onto the knot, easing that up so that we've got a nice neat loop at the end of the hook link for easy terminal tackle attachment. There we go, it doesn't get much neater than that. Now take the little piece of lead core wire that I spoke to you about earlier, take your hook link, and around about halfway down the hook link, begin to wrap that little piece of wire around the hook link, forming some tight little coils all together, maybe 4, 5, 6 coils of wire. Just use your fingernails there just to butt them up nice and tight together. And then just simply snap off any excess in the wire. There we go, that's both tag ends removed. As you can see, this little wrap of wire is only a subtle element to the rig, but it makes the perfect grippy anchor point for the next piece of tackle that we need, a little piece of putty. So simply take your putty, pull away just a little blob like so, and just mould that between your finger and thumb just to make it a little bit more pliable. And then we can then squeeze that onto the wire. There we go, just push the wire coils into the putty like so, and that's going to ensure that it's just not going to move, not going to slide off or even fall off the hook link. And as I did with the last video, I've used a little bit too much, so just take off any excess and then just mould again between your finger and thumb that little bit of putty into a nice little barrel like shape like so. There we go, just take our time, get it nice and neat. This little small piece of putty, it may not seem like much, but it's actually got a really important role. It ensures that our hook link sits nice and tight to the lake bed and reduces the risk of spooking any feeding fish. Being careful not to burn yourself or damage the hook link, you can now steam the shrink tubing down to an aggressive angle, which will help the hook flip inside the fish's mouth, increasing the chances of a secure hook hold. And that's it. The Snowman rig is complete and ready to go. With a critically balanced hook bait arrangement at one end and an anti-tangle sleeve plus loop knot at the other end for quick terminal tackle attachment, we can now clearly see some of the benefits of the Snowman rig. The two hook baits are balancing each other perfectly, giving us the best of both worlds. With a food source buoy, which is most probably going to form part of our feed, combined with a high attract, highly visual pop-up sat on the top, forming a sighter that's going to pull those carp in. Although simple to arrange, this hook bait combination is actually quite advanced, with the weight of the bottom bait only just enough to negate the buoyancy of that 12mm pop-up, meaning that we've got a very slow sinking hook bait, but also one that's going to react really quickly when investigated by feeding fish. Something emphasised further by the combination of the rig ring and the Longshank hook. Every time you lift it, that hook point just naturally falls downwards, meaning that it's going to turn extremely quickly and grab hold. So there you go, the Snowman rig. That's it for the step-by-step section, and now it's time for me to explain my story behind the Longshank SNOWMAN rig. I'll take you back to 2007, where my time was coming to an end on my local lake, Argle Lake. I'd really enjoyed my time on there, but the time had now come to move on pastures new. And luckily enough, my mate Adam had a ticket up on the Lynch Hill complex in Oxfordshire and had invited me up on a guest session, which also meant that I'd be recommended and have my name down on the waiting list. The plan was to fish Christchurch Lake, and leading up to the trip, all I'd heard about was how these fish were super cute, super riggy, and that there was some decent anglers on the lake and they weren't always managing to get bites from these fish. And I did something that was pretty stupid, to be honest with you. I thought, what am I going to do? I've got to change things. I've got to adapt to these fish. And so I decided to change my rigs, change my setup. I can remember tying all little fluorocarbon type rigs, scaling things down, different hook baits, all things that were just completely different to everything that had been working for me. And the upshot was, 2 days into the session, I'm sat on the top bank of Christchurch behind a new dig, looking down the whole length of the lake, my head in my hands. I've come out of my swim because I'm ready to just rip it to pieces. You know, my head was gone. It was just spinning. To make matters worse, there was big fish lumping out everywhere. I can remember seeing a huge mirror, a real dark mirror, come up over the bar in the new dig. And I was like, look, you've already beat me. You don't have to rub salt into the wound. Fortunately, Adam and myself both decided, let's move over onto Willow for the last night. We caught a few fish out of Willow, but in the back of my mind, it was great in a way that I'd been done over on Christchurch. Those fish had proper beat me up. They had handed it to me on a plate. So fast forward a year, and we're heading back up to Lynch Hill, and because I'd got my ticket, and I took a week off of work for like a good session on Christchurch Lake. Probably about a month into the season of the new ticket, so I'd left it go for a little bit. It was so busy with people bivvying up behind other people and all sort of things like that. You know, the syndicate was like really busy at the time. So anyway, we've arrived at the lake, and I'd done something that I now see was probably one of the best things I've ever done in my carp fishing career. And that was, I thought, do you know what? I'm not gonna beat myself up, because I think really it wasn't the Christchurch fish that had it over on me. I'd had it over on myself. I was the one that thought I had to change everything, but really I didn't, and it hadn't worked. So when we went back up, I was determined, right, I'm using the setup that I've used for years and years and years. And when I say years, I mean years. I mean, I was using like the Longshank sort of rig setup before the Longshank, as you see it now, was actually available. We used to use Kamazan B175 fly hooks in a size 8. So, you know, I had loads and loads of confidence in that rig. And nobody was going to change my mind. That's what I was going to use. Now, I've got to tell you, when we're driving up, Adam was kind of looking at me thinking, you want to use a Longshank hook in a really weedy pit? And then I get there and a few people are like, not sure, you know, choddies seem to be the way to go at the time and stuff like this, wide gape hooks. But no, I was focused. I was going to use what I was like most confident in. If I had to change after that, fair enough, but I was going to start off with what I was most confident with, and that was the Longshank SNOWMAN Rig. First night of the session, I think I got into the new dig. It wasn't really where I wanted to be, but there was a few fish about, and I think I had a 28-pound common that first night, and that was already sort of making me think, yeah, you know what, you was right in sticking with this rig. A couple of nights into the session, a swim became available a bit further down, the number 3 swim, central area of the lake. I moved into that swim, and that's when things really kicked off for me. I think I had 11 fish for the session, something like that. Had a number of 30s, I had fish that I don't even know if they were named at the time. I think they've been named since, but I had the baby slate at 33, I had baby poolies 35, I think that's done 40 pounds since then. I had a big common at 37, 14 ounces, something like that. That's done 40 pounds, and all on that little size 8 Longshank rig, the one that everybody told me wouldn't work, but it was what I was most confident in. Now, maybe that's why I caught. Maybe I fished more effectively because I was fishing confidently and I wasn't double taking myself or doubting myself. All I was worried about was getting on the fish, and then I moved into a swim and I was on the fish again and finding my spots. And I remember one of those spots, I had a clear area out, sort of about 16 wraps that I had a couple of rods on. But there was a closer area, I think it was around about 9 wraps, something like that. And it was just an area where it wasn't clean, it was just thick weed, but I could get a donk. I couldn't drag the lead back or anything like that, I could just get a donk. And having 2 rods out on the clear spot, I thought to myself, you know what, it's worth having a gamble on this 3rd rod. And that was the one that was doing all the fish. I mean, inevitably, I remember I did get a take where the number 3 swim on Christchurch, it's got a high bank, so you can hit the rod and keep walking back, and quite often that sort of keeps the fish coming up and up and up to the upper layers of the water, makes it easier for landing them. But this one, it absolutely weeded me up solid. Ended up putting the rod back down on the rest, and it got to a point where I'm like, right, I've got to go and get the boat. So got my life jacket, walked off, got the boat, left my mate Adam there, guarding the rod, and went down to the bottom of the lake, got the boat, just got in it, and I looked back up towards my swim, and there's Adam holding my rod, and it's fully compressed, and he's like giving it some, and I'm like, hey son, there's no way you're gonna land that fish. I remember paddling that boat like a blooming dragon boat racer. I hit the bank so hard when I got to my swim, I actually beached the boat up the swim, and obviously took the rod back off of Adam, and that was that 37-pound common. But again, it reinforced my confidence in that rig, because that little Longshank hook had landed that fish from all that weed, and it would been absolutely solid, but it still did the job for me. Now, rightly or wrongly, I've got my own sort of thought process behind the mechanics of this rig and why it might work. Now, initially, when you look at a Longshank hook, especially in, say, a size 8, it's got a very narrow gape, so the distance between the hook point and the opposite hook shank is very narrow. Now, for me, that does something really important. That is, if I can get that hook into a fish's mouth and get a hook hold, it's very direct, it's very narrow, and it's not going to spin, turn. For me, it's probably less likely to come out. If any of you have ever used size 10 hooks, really small hooks, yeah, you can sometimes lose a fish on a small hook, but when you land them, you've got a job to find the hook, they're so well hooked. So that's one aspect of the Longshank rig. Another aspect is that once I add a kicker, the distance between the end of the kicker and sort of like the eye of the hook back to the hook point is actually a very wide gap. So when that hook is flipping, there's a lot of leverage to find a good hook hold. Now in the case of Christchurch, when I fished it, it was a syndicate. It had been day ticket before and the carp were really old, and obviously they'd been living in that weedy environment for all this time. So quite a lot of those fish, they did have thick bottom lips, maybe short underslung mouths, quite small mouths. And one carp that had just this type of small mouth was the king of the lake, the hamster. And I remember, you know, I spoke to you about that initial session. Coming towards the end of the season, it was the October full moon. I was back on the lake and I was approaching something like 60 fish now from that lake, all on this Snowman rig. And I hooked the hamster, I landed the hamster, a PB carp at 47 pound. Now, would I have caught that if I'd been dallying around with my rig? Probably not. It just goes to show you that the first thing that you should do is fish with what you're most confident in. Let's say you're going to France and it's a lake completely opposite to the lake you're fishing back at home. I would always say, to begin with at least, use the rig that you're most confident in using, because it's out the equation. Much like your bait, you use a bait you're confident in, it's out the equation. All you're worried about is locating the fish, getting onto those fish or as close as possible, and then presenting rigs. And then, if those fish are showing on you and you're not getting bites, then maybe look at your rigs. But chances are, if you've got a confident rig, it's going to be coming up trumps for you. Hopefully we enjoyed that story to go along with the technical section to this video. I know I quite enjoyed giving you a little bit of my background when it comes to the Snowman rig. Right, now for the part that you've all been waiting for, the competition and your chance to win all the bits that you need to go away and tie up one of these Snowman rigs yourself. All you need to do to enter is simply go to the comments box below, write in there your all-time favourite Mainline baits product, and then we'll pick one lucky winner at random. Right, please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Please hit that notification button so you know when the next video is coming out. If you don't subscribe to the channel yet, please hit that subscription button below. We'd really appreciate it. And if you want to watch more how-to videos on tying up rigs like these, I'll leave some links to those videos here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.